Everyone knows that change is never ending. Media continues to tell us that change is hard, when in reality, we're constantly changing and adapting. Let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk because our role as leaders is to help others adapt and apply these changes to drive higher levels of success. And I got a guest today who's ready to assist us with a step by step approach to do just that.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jollis.
Today's guest, Jeff Skipper, is an international change leadership consultant for organizations in energy, finance, technology, and other industries. For over 25 years, he's guided change projects by focusing on the people side of change. His new book is Dancing with Disruption, Leading Dramatic Change During Global Transformation. Glad to have him with us. He's here with us now. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thanks, Rob. Good to be here.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure having you here. And with you, I want to jump right into that one aspect that has the greatest influence on success and failure, and that's resistance. You're talking to a sales guy. That fear of change, that resistance to change is big. So let's jump right on that one. How do you go about moving people past that fear of change or that resistance to change?
Well, you just said something critical about that. So first of all, a huge topic right now. And the number one assumption that people make is resistance is all bad. It's when people are holding up the hand, right, to you and say, no more, I'm done, I'm out. But we really need to think about that as a continuum. So on one end, we've got this anchor where there are people who are entrenched. I'm not moving. I don't like what you're doing. I'm not going there. But on the other end of the resistance scale is people who are interested, but there is some level of fear, as you said. And that could be just based in, I don't really understand what's going on, because often we fear the unknown. So resistance is a full continuum. And the first thing that leaders have to do is figure out, well, where are people when we feel like they're not moving? Is it because they really don't like it, or they just don't know what's going on? And once we have a better fix on that, now we can start to plan out strategies for moving them along. It could be as simple as, hey, if we fill in the blanks, more communication, better communication. If I change the benefits I've been waving around to something that's actually more pertinent to them, like some say, oh, it's job security. Other it's no, I want to see our company doing something more environmentally friendly, or I want to see us embrace a strategy that takes a bit of risk, but it's going to put us out in front. There's a whole spectrum of strategies we can bring to bear once we first understand why people are choosing to resist or just not moving.
Right. And is that something that you write about, I mean, I'm a process guy, so I like process. I like things that are measurable. So is that something that you talk about in terms of a step within your process to manually or intentionally poll the opinions of others?
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes they get asked, what is that one thing that leaders need to do? And I see it's get out of your office and talk to people. Unless you're doing some of those one-on-ones and opening up the ability for people to be very frank with you and transparent and reveal the fact that, hey, I'm a bit worried about where we're going. That's the only way you're going to learn about what's holding them back. And then I write about the fact that you have to do that proactively. Like right from the beginning, you're thinking about this change. What are the potential barriers that people will face that's going to make it difficult for them to go from point A to point B, to really get in line and move in the direction you want them to go?
Yeah. Let me just poke you a little bit more on that. So because that looks good on paper and I'm with you. It's shit, but sometimes I'm worried that management's only polling, certain pieces or management kind of can't get out of their own head a little bit. I'm anti-management. Right. But I'm assuming, but I just want you to fill in the blanks. This is some sort of methodical cross section of employee or company, how do you dig into that?
Yeah, I was talking to another practitioner last week, and she was saying, how do I ensure that I've kind of got all the groups covered?
Yeah.
So I'm tapped in all over the place. And I said, first of all, you won't be. There's always a group that gets missed. As I like to say, what do you mean we have an accounts receivable organization in Latvia? I mean, they're just out there somewhere. But the reality is you're always having to ask questions. So in whatever forums you're in, or you end up in a group, it's asking questions, tapping into where people are to try and get that broad base. You're right. You can't be biased and just focusing on the favorites. And the other thing is, part of my early career was in manufacturing, and manufacturing get lots of people with no filters, and they're wonderful people. They're not negative per se. They just don't hold back in telling you. So finding those individuals with no filters, not afraid to tell you the way it is, not going to sugarcoat things, very critical for leaders really get a sense of if they have people on board.
Yeah. I'm 40 years as a corporate trainer, and whenever I set up a pilot, I always kind of correct my client, because my client wants to basically create kind of a layup atmosphere. And I go, no, actually, I really want a cross section. I want the most grizzled salespeople you have next to the ones that don't like anything that they see. Put a couple of new hires, but I'm crudely trying to create more of a reasonable polling situation. Because remember, I worked with a project once with Xerox where we kept getting pushed on, well, you're doing the sales training. What kind of gains are you seeing? And we were seeing 22% gains in sales. Man, it's amazing. Now, turn the page and you'll see all we had in those programs were new hires. So whether a new hire goes to training or not, if they stay, they're probably going to go up about 15%. In other words, our numbers weren't really good because we really didn't get a full picture of what was going on. That's okay for Xerox. When I went on my own, that's not a good pilot for me. So that's why I'm poking around there a little bit with you.
Yeah, it's fair. It's breadth and depth. So, in this work that I do, we will roll out surveys and try to get a sense of where people are. How do they respond to their awareness of where you're going and whether they feel they're going to have the support they require. But it's only out in going out and talking to a cross section. I remember one big, we did an enterprise rollout of an ERP system. And because it was such a large audience, we set up online training, which is very common these days. And we looked at the numbers like, oh, the completions look great. And the smile sheets, the feedback, all positive. And they started talking to supervisors and said, yeah, we'd pop into the room where we're doing that. And we could see them with one finger going page forward, page forward, page forward. Right. So they're just clicking their way through the training and, of course, having zero impact. But until you're up close and personal and working with folks across the organization, you really don't have a sense whether they're stepping up to the change or not.
Yeah. And, I love your topic, by the way, Jeff, because, again, from a sales perspective, I've got, car manufacturers and financial companies and NASA and negotiation, hostage negotiators, the most eclectic group of people. But the weird thing is, the one thing that we can all agree to is the biggest impediment in their way is that fear of change. Is I see what you want us to do, looks pretty good, and what we're doing isn't perfect. But what if what you're about to have us do is worse than what we're doing? It's that devil you know, devil you don't know. That would make a good chapter title. But because at the end of the day, I think sometimes that's what we're battling. So I'm curious from your angle. I don't know whether I'm coming in your book or just wanting to get that author's mind of yours. But you've got a bunch of salespeople listening right now who are fighting that fear of change, that resistance that you write about.
Yeah,
I know you're not going to wave a magic wand. 3 of these and 4 of those you're taking care of, but in 30 seconds, 60 seconds, what would you say to them in terms of with a client trying to move them past that devil you know, devil you don't know?
Sure.
Sitting on that decision point. Yeah.
It absolutely is a question of being able to envision the future. So if the person you're trying to move cannot see themselves successfully on the other side at point B, they're not going to embrace very well. I do an exercise with leaders called Joe's hot dog stand. So one scenario, hey, Joe, we're going to have to move your hot dog stand 2 blocks away. And you can look down the street and see where it's going to go. Good traffic there. People are coming. Okay, no problem. I can do that. Sidewalk's in good shape. I can move my car. But what if Joe has to move across the other side of downtown and he can no longer see the destination? Now think about all the questions he's got about whether he can be successful there. That's what you have to tackle as a salesperson, as a leader, to help convince someone. So they can't see themselves exactly in that future, that success. Let me tell you what the steps are to get you there and why you can be assured it's going to be a safe transition.
Yeah, well said. It's I learned it as an insurance salesman at 21 years old when when I'm selling a product where nobody's really dying right now, you know,
Right.
and but I did get a call, once a year, once every other year, somebody looking for it. You realize that they were already battling with something at that point. So I've always kept this phrase in my head that from a selling angle, it's not what is, it's what if. And perhaps
Exactly.
that's where you're going, where we can get the client to not necessarily focus on where they are right now, but what if this does occur? Let's
Yep.
have a conversation there. Maybe that leads us to change.
You sparked another thought that's interesting. You and I both heard this phrase, hey, relax, we're not saving lives here. And I bring that up because it's common with a lot of changes. You can connect them with saving lives in some way. So I'm not necessarily working with people who are in healthcare or they're firefighters, things like that. But somehow, if an organization wants to see a change occur, whether it's implementing some piece of software or changing the way they work with customers, they're doing that to impact someone's life. Someone's life should get at least incrementally better as a result of what we're doing here. That has to be a key piece of the messaging in painting the picture of that future and saying it's not just that we're implementing a system, it's that we're trying to make this process even better for customers so they walk away with the biggest grin possible on their face. And when people can envision that, that's motivating. It's not so inspiring to, do new technology, but if I can impact someone's life, that moves people.
Yeah. Sometimes what we again in the sales world, we sometimes refer to as a whiff 'em. What's in it for me?
Exactly
We don't
right.
necessarily wait for somebody to ask that question or put up their hand. Believe me, it's always there. I think
Mhm.
it's there, particularly with successful people or people we really want as clients, prospects to work with. Imagine the alternative just for a moment, somebody not really caring if there's anything in it for them. So
Yeah.
I think we have to respect people who will resist a little bit. What they're telling you is, I'll be your best client. I'll be right behind you. I just need this addressed. And think how many times we kind of sort of delay on that.
Mhm.
The book is Dancing with Disruption, Leading Dramatic Change During Global Transformation. And I just can't think of a more important topic, quite frankly, than where we're at right now, which is trying to figure out how to get people, past that
That's right.
resistance, that
That's right.
change. So let's talk about some of the pieces you got. You've got some critical steps in there. We can't get the whole book, but maybe you can cherry pick a little bit of things that you think a leader needs to know to get basically to optimize what they're trying to do. Give me a
Sure.
couple of those steps or tips.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, no surprise that I'm starting out with setting a clear goal.
Mm.
And here I often get questions just on such a basic concept of, Jeff, we came up with a strategy and we know exactly where we want to go. And then people are really struggling to get on board. And I remind them, as a leader, you've been thinking about this for months, possibly years, in order to put together this strategy, this endeavor that you finally release. And then you're looking for people to adapt their thinking within days or months. You've got to give them time. You've been building up to this. You've been integrating into thinking even the ways that you're working already. People need a similar runway. It won't be as long as what you got, but it takes time for them to absorb that. So having a clear goal, painting that picture, making it as purposeful as possible for folks. And then another one I spend quite a bit of time on is impact assessment. Well, what do you mean by that? It's more than just how is a job going to change? It's how are they going to feel about it? So I always recommend two dimensions to consider. For any change that you're rolling out, do people feel it's a positive or a negative? Just generally, would they give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down? And then secondarily, how complex is the change? And this goes back to our example of Joe's hot dog stand. Am I just moving 2 blocks or am I moving across the city? And therefore, it's a much more complex change. It's harder for me to envision myself being successful. And if along the way, it's possible that people will see me fail, there may be embarrassment, possibly shame, you can expect a fair amount of resistance, and not necessarily the entrenched kind where I hate this project, I'm not getting on board, but the fear kind of, I don't want to dip my toe in the water because I'm afraid there are a few sharks in there and it's too risky. So assessing impact of a change can be done fairly easily with those two dimensions of, do I see this as something that's positive? How would I rate it? And then second, how complex it is. And you get a sense of where you might anticipate resistance along the way.
Yeah. I almost wrote a book on implementation one time. I had actually written a book. I'm not going to tell you that book title, but I had a piece tucked in the back on implementation as a trainer, and sold the book. And then once I sold it, I went, "Oh, that's so good. I should just build a book around it." And the publisher would not give it back to me. They're like, "Oh, no, that's ours now. We like it." But to this day, I really think that, and I'm coming to you from a training standpoint, but that we don't fail on our deliveries. We fail on our implementation. And, and so that's why I don't know if you follow, Duran and some of these guys, where, Duran, for instance, believed in top-down training, top-down deliveries.
Right.
So that it wasn't, when we're talking about change here, we're not talking about a manager sitting on the sidelines,
right,
watching his or her crew go get trained, or this new process implemented, and then going, "Okay, is that done now? Let's get back to work in your cubicles." It's got to come from the top down.
One of my favorite anecdotes is about Michael Dell for Dell Computers, and that he would show up to training and be in the front row. So that leading by example, I'm part of it. I need this as much as you. How can that not inspire people to say, "Okay, this is legit. I should get involved"? So yeah, what you're saying is exactly true.
I was, I think, 30 years old. I was just getting ready to go out as a consultant. I was working for a financial company. Changed its name a bunch of times, but it used to be called Van Camp and Merritt. And then Vesco and all sorts of companies got them. But to your point, Jeff, I was setting up a training, and everybody had cleared out. It was between speakers, and one guy hung around completely dressed like not very well, actually. I'm trying to say it nicely. But can I help you pass that out? Things I'm like, here, sort of threw it at him. Anyway, it turned out to be Jack Merritt. Okay. One of the founders of this financial institution. He was an amazing human being, and it speaks to who we are, him. But I'll never forget that. But he was, in that front row, he was passing out paper. He wanted people to see that. Why invest in change if we don't have, senior leaders walking that walk?
Yeah, exactly true. My big fear for leaders is that often they don't know how. So I actually end up spending a fair bit of time working with employees frontline, trying to help them figure out, how do I navigate change myself? And one of the key points I like to make with them is, your leader may make mistakes along the way. They're trying to help you, but they may make mistakes, may get things wrong. Keep in mind, they not only have the responsibility of helping you through the change, they're also trying to help themselves. And that's not easy. It's often double duty for them, because they're having to invest their energy in, again, not just coaching, but navigating the change themselves, getting through their own stress levels, all the little pieces that have to be organized. And that is not easy. So creating this mutual understanding of what we're going through, I think, is very important for organizations that want to create resilience and get good at moving through change quickly, or dancing with disruption, as we say.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes when I'm working with people and coaching them, and who's dealing with a bad leader, a bad manager, and usually they'll begin to kind of create almost a script, of a plot line that actually doesn't really exist. I'll bet they're got, the kids are unhappy, and it's a bad marriage, and blah, 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 blah. And so when I'm working with people, I go, well, it's an interesting plot line. I'd like to make up my own if I could. And mine goes like this: that manager may have come from a broken family, may have a special needs child, and maybe didn't get a whole lot of sleep last night. And, and I said, because while we're making up things, I'm allowed to make up things. But if my story were true, how would you feel about that manager? How would you feel about that situation? And it changes the way people think. And I think, to your point, we get stuck in our head a little bit
Yeah.
with these narratives that actually don't exist.
That's right. That's
We
right.
just leap into them.
It's too easy to assume that if we broadcast, this is where we're going, this is the goal, here's how we'll get that's enough. And we
Yeah.
don't take into account, just like you said, different backgrounds, different contexts, certain things appeal to me and don't appeal to others. I'm dealing with competing distractions at home. There's an organization in the UK that has a director of happiness. And I love the title. So I'm like, okay, what's this
Yeah.
about? So she talks about her role as really connecting with individuals and that they're in that good mindset when they work because they feel it has an impact on performance. But she said that she spends 1/3 of her time helping employees with finances. So
Wow.
renegotiating loans, cell phone plans, except you name it. And her point was, we can assume that there's a dividing line between work and home. People bring it's just people. They bring all that stuff to work and it has an impact. So if I, in my role, can help them reduce the stress, the anxiety associated with finances, will they perform better as an individual at work? And we think the answer is yes. So yeah, fascinating.
Really fascinating, because I'm sitting here going, how did we not, how did I not connect the dots there on this end when you think about the numbers that are out there of marriages that break up and what percentage are due to financial issues? Why wouldn't that impact us at work? And, I'm sitting here going, how did I not draw a line between those two?
Right.
That's it. That's
right.
interesting. I'm glad you got some numbers and thought behind that.
Yeah,
All right. Yeah.
it's just too easy to assume. Again, we do that broad broadcast and we're good, but we have to be aware of where individuals are at. I want to comment as well. I hope you don't mind,
Oh,
but I listened to the podcast you did with Linda Rossetti on her book of the same name. And
uh-huh.
when I saw that, I was like, oh dear, I picked a title that's being used. But reality is, in listening to that, it's perfect. She's got this focus in how do individuals help themselves through change, that other side of the equation. Might as well focus on what leaders need to do to maximize the probability that employees are going to embrace change along the way. But her book is for the individual. When you see these disruptions in life, how do
Right.
you navigate those successfully and come out on top? And perfectly states, this is often a challenge of identity for individuals. She's got it exactly right. So I just had to say these things just dovetail so nicely between what individuals need to do to navigate change and then what leaders need to do to help them along the way.
Right. Yeah. And what salespeople need to do to listen to both of these,
Yeah, that's right.
because quite frankly, that is the point of impact for the sales community, which is not dropping features and benefits on an individual or offering solutions to a problem somebody has whispered, might be annoying them a little bit, but truly getting in there and understanding the problem and helping people see the impact of the problem. That's how we move people past fear of change.
Right.
If this would be a nice idea that you got, Jeff, we'll think about it. And if this is the most important thing and we've discovered it, you've helped us discover it, we'll probably go ahead and make the changes you're looking to make. But it's a beast. It's the hardest thing out there. You learn how to do that. You can be a great consultant, a wonderful leader, and a heck of a salesperson. I'm telling you right now.
That's
Is
very
this a book
true.
is this a book? I'm cherry picking little pieces that I like, but is this a book if I, as a salesperson, I pick up this book, I'm going to get some ideas to help me work with my clients?
I'm glad you asked that because I'm working with a sales organization right now. And one of the biggest topics is change fatigue. So now I don't have that specifically referenced in the book, but to your question, yeah, you can pull some of these nuggets out there. The concept of change fatigue is that organizations and individuals in them get kind of burned out on change. So you're trying to sell something and they're going, yeah, we're kind of bought in and we see the need, but we're doing a lot of stuff internally right now. Can we do one more thing? Is that really possible? And so the coaching I'm giving to the sales team is around helping the customer understand the implementation process. So it's beyond the WIFM, the benefits. Okay, yeah, I got those. But when you try and roll this out, what does that look like? For your people, you got to sell this internally. So how does that look for them? And helping them understand, getting into that customer's mind of what does rollout look like? What are the potential barriers? Where might you have resistance points? All the stuff I talk about has direct bearing on that sales process as well.
Yeah. I sometimes refer to it in the training world as the flavor of the month syndrome. In other words, okay, we're going to be learning this new process or idea, snicker, snicker, whisper, don't worry, in 3 months we'll be on something new.
Right.
Which is a cautionary tale to all those who are listening to remind yourself that you don't want to be switching your processes around and chasing that flavor of the month. What Jeff right now is talking about is the hard work, which is not just coming up with this idea, but putting it in play and showing all those around you. And I love the fact that we're going to get information across the board, but when we do begin to look at change, it will be a change that we are committed to. Management has to convince the rest of us of that, because I was a manager, but before that I wasn't, and we'd be watching thinking, it sure is easier doing it the crappy way we're doing it. Are we really committed to this, or can we just ride this thing out? And that's the scary part.
Yeah. You're also getting at a critical aspect, which is credibility. This flavor of the month thing, it kills credibility.
Yeah.
And even if I'm the best leader and I point you towards this vision of the future in your body, you love it, or even the sale, I want it, but you lack credibility, people don't want to follow you. They don't buy in. So we've got to be very careful around what we promise and what we deliver on.
Absolutely. So put on your prediction hat here for me a little bit. And because I'm assuming certain particularly larger moves are going to have a lot of points of resistance. How do you determine, if not through the polling or the information you're getting from the employees, when you actually do try and make these changes? And we know that sometimes you make a change, you fix one spot, but another spot can't open up. How do you figure out where that resistance is going to come from, those points of resistance?
So there are different things we can do to be as predictive as possible. And in the book, I give a number of categories around that. For example, issues of language. And people immediately think, oh, you mean like you speak French, I speak English. And no, I don't mean that. I mean, there's a lingo that's used at the executive level or even the sales level that is not necessarily shared by other groups who may be supposed to benefit from what's happening. Issues of time. So we're rolling something out and people work shifts, and the day shift always gets the best medicine, the night shift doesn't. So there's these different ways we can anticipate potential barriers. But really, to your question, often we learn what they are as we encounter them. So we have to stay closely tapped in. A lot of organizations will create a change network, and it goes by many different names, but having those people out there that they communicate with regularly, and part of their role is allocated to feeding back. Here's what's happening. The implementation is failing at this point, or people are trying to work around what you're doing because A, B, and C. So having folks that have a portion of their time dedicated to feeding information back is really important, so we know as quickly as possible where we're hitting points of resistance or people are experiencing failure.
Yeah. Excellent. All right, I'm going to hit you with a case study, sort of. It's a Jollis case study. Don't worry, it won't be that hard. I'm thinking about, in the 80s and the 90s, 2000s, when we first started, when everybody started scratching their head going, you know what, we got to get into this quality movement. And I'm bringing it up because it's the poster child of sort of failure of implementation. Okay. There were, particularly as an ex-Xeroid, there was the Japanese products kicking our butt and them following a very tight quality improvement, problem solving. They were on it. And so it became sort of that flavor of the month where everyone would say, well, now we're into quality. Everyone's into quality. And yet it kind of came and it went. I believe it's an implementation issue, not necessarily a process issue, but maybe you can plug that in. Where did we go wrong and what would you have done? Because that one really did blow through. We couldn't even use the word anymore. We had to change it to process reengineering. We called it other things because nobody wanted to hear about quality anymore.
That's right.
An oxymoron when you think about it. It's ironic. Don't bring up the word quality.
Right. It's bad here.
All right. What happened?
we destroyed all credibility around that word. It just became associated with negative things. I have to start by saying there were, of course, some successful implementations. So now you can set up contrast. And everything that you said, the way you expressed it was so telling, because you have that bit of sarcasm woven in there, right? We're going to do quality now. I'm like, okay, here's that thing, we'll probably pass in time as well. But it was set up as a copycat. So the Japanese are doing it well, and they're seeing great success. So we just copy what they're doing, bring it in here, then, we'll be successful too. Well, that's like saying if I stitch on a third arm, I will be, 1/3 more productive. And of course, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't integrate, doesn't weave in to the way that the organization works. So quality should not have been an initiative. It should have been strategic and part of, this is the goal, this is the mission. Here's how it figures in with our management system, how all of our systems work. Here's how we put together employee groups that are cross-functional and can actually make change happen. One of the biggest downfalls of that quality movement was asking people to do things, but then no power for implementation. Well, you can't just make changes like that. I mean, that would have a domino effect, and all of a sudden we're in trouble. So you had folks trying to make change, but no real power. It wasn't part of the structure. It was more like an appendage. It was doomed to fail from the beginning. But for others that were really adopting the philosophy and bringing it into the organization and educating people, it still happens today with Lean Six Sigma. It can be done. So with proper rollout, bringing the skills online that folks require and giving them the power they need to actually implement change can work. But a lot of that didn't happen originally.
Right. Well, here's some interesting information for you. I actually, although I brought it up and told you how I snickered and laughed at everyone else, Xerox was the shining star of a company that did go through implementation. And I actually became a quality instructor for Xerox. So because the old saying, if you want to learn something, teach it. So right. I begged them to let me teach it, and it actually worked out well because I wanted to take elements of that when I started to write about selling, about how we have to. There's a lot of things that cross over there. But I will tell you from just this one case study of Xerox, because I get asked this from my clients every now and then. More snickering, by the way, but I tell them, well, first of all, you should know this wasn't an option. It was called a condition of employment. We were in quality families, documenting what we were doing, minimum of 2 a year, or we weren't fired, but we were given basically a 3 out of a 5 on a review, meaning, oh, you're 200% of your given sales plan. Congratulations. And we loving that. But you don't exceed expectations in all areas. So that's basically C work. And so that, and we top-down trained it. I was always very proud of that. One last thing. When I say top-down training, I'm not sure if David's still alive, but David Kearns was our CEO when I was there. Amazing guy, really into this movement. And we all got laminated cards. And David Kearns, was always holding that card, said, you will never find me without a laminated card. So I was working at the training center at Xerox. I was on 2,400 acres, lots of running trails around there. And Kearns was a big runner. I pulled in one time and I saw him on the road running, just running shorts and a shirt. Yeah. And I thought, I'm going to do it. And I pulled up and I got out, and I was a runner myself. I just started jogging. I said, just curious. Got your laminated card? And he went running into his running shorts and said, here it is. And flashed that card.
Yeah.
That's how a company says, okay, our CEO is walking the walk. Right. This is how we're going to do business. This isn't an option, but it was very unusual for a company to do that. But that was Xerox. I'm going to give them credit for that. I don't know about to this day, but I can tell you for my 10 more years and years after, we never let it go, ever. We were on it.
Yeah, that's power. When leaders out front demonstrating, and it's not just the artifact laminated card, but they are living it out. They are showing up in the training. They're reinforcing it. You mentioned the lever of it's part of the performance appraisal system that drives behavior immediately. So right. That's how you get stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I say, because I've had some very senior level people go, secret. Well, condition of employment doesn't hurt, as we say, but I also believe when people see the value in it, and just one more, and I'll just leave it alone, but maybe some thoughts for you. We also would compete with our quality projects. So you had a company that on our own time, not on company time, were meeting and following process behaviors to try and improve the company that they were working for, find areas that we could impact. And then our projects, we would compete with them, and we would win trips and prizes. And so there was an element of competition. And all of that made it not so much a chore, but something that we wanted to do. But if you were on the outside looking in, you go, is it me, or do you see what I see? We got tens of thousands of people working to try and improve this company, following intelligent process behaviors, because you were trained in the first 4 days of employment with Xerox. You went through quality training, but that's the other side of the case study. Anyway, hey, I thought I'd share it with you. All right. How about a couple of, we're coming down the home stretch? How about a couple of mentors that have helped you along the way?
You referenced training a few times, and actually I have a similar background. I got into instructional design, did a lot of that work early on. So, I'm actually out of the corner of my eye looking at my bookshelf in the background, and you can't see it, but up there is Bob Mager's six pack. I don't know if you remember him, but some of that original thinking in analyzing performance problems and determining it's not a training problem, it's everything else wrapped around it that is driving the behavior you don't want. Right. So he was very influential early in my career. I do have to give credit to spending 12 years with IBM's consulting unit, which taught me how to consult. And again, further that, how do you understand problems, but then also feed them back in a way that a client will accept and understand. Now, it's interesting, for your audience, when I was looking at going independent, working on my own, it's like, oh, but I don't know how to sell. And of course, rapidly figured out I did. And that was all that training from IBM, not about selling, but understanding the client, understanding needs, what's going to make them satisfied. And that's how you speak to a proposal and start moving the needle on their desire to close the deal. So that was quite influential along the way. Also done a lot of work studying Edgar Schein, who's big into culture. So again, how do you change not necessarily the strategy, but the way that organization work, what people say is acceptable. That's been a big influence on my career as well.
And it's not, I'm smiling because it's not a coincidence that some of the greatest consultants I've ever met come from one of two companies. I know there are others out there, but I'm a homer. Either you see them come from Big Blue, IBM, or they come from Xerox. And the reason why, and the similarities with the companies, and those companies were a lot more connected together than you might think. People don't realize, but is because you and I were taught process behaviors.
That's right.
It was nice to be entertained, inspired, motivated, but we were taught process behaviors. And that was one of the greatest gifts that I got as well, which was, okay, I see the value now. Obviously, we can stylize. Obviously, we shape the shot. But we're not just saying step one is to make somebody feel this way. And step two is, you make them feel like they trust you. No, there are process behaviors that we can stylize. And those two companies, I think, were at the forefront of really digging in on process.
Yeah, I agree. I remember when I got handled the 2-inch thick binder called Line of Visibility Engineering Methodology. Hey, Jeff, you should learn this. Like, oh my goodness, I'm in the wrong place. But yes, process at the core of everything. Completely agree.
Right. And last thing, but two companies that had to kind of figure it out, that we pretty much dominated their area and realized we got to hustle as hard, if not harder than everyone else, because our name isn't going to carry the day. Xerox had its patents in the 70s,
right?
Where you couldn't even make a copier. Pretty hard to sell, huh? I used to have old commercials of people. They were reality commercials on Madison Avenue in showrooms, 5-6 people deep through the glass, looking at this xerography and waiting for their turn to copy something because they couldn't believe that it could make a copy. That's not a hard product to sell. But you build something good, as the competition says that looks real good. We're going to build one too. And so you always have to, you have to stay on top of it. Those are two companies that walk that walk. Anyway, no wonder a Xeroid and an IBM are getting along today.
That's right. That's right.
Makes sense to me. All right, one more time, folks. I'm going to tell you that's Dancing with Disruption, Leading Dramatic Change During Global Transformation. We're going to find that on Amazon and all the other online stores, I'm assuming. So everybody knows, if they're listening to me, that you get a book, that's only half your job. You write a nice review on that book. Now you can sleep well at night. Now you did your job. Because guys like Jeff work real hard on these books. So if that's a topic that interests you, and change, I'm trying to figure out who exactly is spared a conversation on change. Let's go grab that book, take a look at it, and give him a nice review on that book. I'm sure he'd be very happy with that. I know I've learned a bunch of stuff today. I'm grateful you came in. How do people get a hold of you?
Well, easiest place is my website, jeffskipperconsulting.com. And you're right, Amazon, all the other big platforms, type in Jeff Skipper. There's not many Skippers around, so I'm pretty easy to find.
No, I'm sure people had fun with that when you were in school.
Oh, yes, they did.
You kind of look like the Skipper, but I just thought I'd jump under the bandwagon there. Just a little bit. All right. Good. So look, again, really love talking about it. I'm glad you drew a distinction between the two books, and they're kind of going in different angles there. But I will, one of the hottest topics for me, and always will be, how you manage people through change. You learn that, you become a better leader, a better salesperson, a better parent. I wish parents would jump on the bandwagon too, and realize that that you're at your best when you're managing and helping people through change. Right. So good on you, sir. And thank you so much for being on the show. I'm real grateful we had you.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Rob.
Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everyone. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.